We're about to embark on a thrilling journey where we will challenge the prevailing myth about boards are reserved solely for large corporations. That's right, strategic governance isn't just for the big players. It's the secret sauce that you can take your small business or SME or medium-sized enterprise to the heights of success. Think about it as some rocket boosters to your entrepreneurial dreams. By embracing strategic governance, you not only tap into the wealth and expertise guidance, you'll also be unlocking at opportunities that once were thought out of reach. It's now time to debunk these misconceptions, embrace the remarkable possibilities that strategic governance offers. At this juncture, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce to you our speaker for today, Patricia Wanjama. She's a seasoned governance practitioner and a corporate lawyer with over 16 years experience in legal practice and in the corporate world. She holds several notable credentials, including a registered certified secretary, accredited governance auditor with the Institute of Certified Secretaries of Kenya. She has successfully established boards and governance frameworks from scratch, while also excelling in stakeholder relationship management and corporate social responsibility administration, with experience in both corporate and nonprofit organizations. She currently serves as the lead governance and sustainability consultant at Akira Consult Limited. So let's sit back, relax, get ready to unlock the secrets of strategic governance. Welcome, Patricia.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Richard, for the kind introduction, and thank you, Springboard, for the opportunity. I am delighted to be here. What I'm doing really is to share my perspectives, but I look forward to engaging with the audience. Without further ado, I will be sharing my screen so that I can put together my presentation. So that is me. As Richard introduced me, I am a governance consultant. What I do is advise on corporate governance. That includes board advisory, training, and audit. I want to go to my slides. This is what our table of content will be today. Understanding the SME space, introducing the board of directors. We shall then chart our board journey. We shall then discuss how do we create our boards. And then how do we derive value and accountability from our boards? And then we shall discuss the governance frameworks around the board system. Let's get situated. I shall play a short video. Vusi Thembakayo is one of my most inspiring entrepreneurs. He has a bit to say about the entrepreneurship journey, and I want us to listen to him and to learn from him.
We believe that there are 5 levels to business. The first level is where you're the professional, you know how to do the job, so you do the job yourself. The second level is where you're self-employed, but you got 1 or 2 people in your team to whom you can give off some of the side tasks that are important in you achieving the job. The third level is where you become a business owner. You have other professionals working in the business for you, but it still requires of you to do quality testing. Most entrepreneurs build from that level of professional to self-employed to business owner, and that's where they stop. The level above that is what we call the entrepreneur. It's somebody who's developed a code for how the business runs, who's put processes in to make sure that that code is followed. The level above that is what we call the founder. It means that you know one day you won't be there anymore. There will be many CEOs, but there will only ever be 1 or 2 founder or co-founders.
So maybe back to, and I'll stop sharing my screen for now, maybe back to us who are joining in today. We may be playing various roles against our career journeys. We may be professionals at this stage. Possibly we have a side hustle because that's what we are as Kenyans. Some of us may have moved from the professional space to the self-employed space. And this is where you turn your profession into a business, or at least your, what people say, passion to profit. Thereafter, your business grows, gets a few employees, you become a business owner because now you are employing people to work under you. Thereafter, you become an entrepreneur, or business owner and an entrepreneur actually sidestep into each other a lot. A business owner could be somebody who's looking to grow a business from a 1-person, 2-person shop to a 10 to 50-person employee enterprise. Thereafter, after an entrepreneur is the founder, you become the person people say, this is the person who started this business, or this is where the story began. So I'll ask Ayeko to present a poll. I'd like to get to know you as our audience. What kind of business are you representing today? We'll do this in 10 seconds, and then Ayeko will present the results. Just to get a feel of who is part of our audience today. As Richard said, we should network within the chat function and get to know each other, but who are we representing today? Are we a micro enterprise? Are we a small enterprise, a medium enterprise, or other? And we shall go into these definitions, don't you worry. This is great. 29% equally within the micro enterprise and small enterprise. And then the next half of the participants are between a medium enterprise and other. You may not have understood maybe what a micro, small, or medium enterprise would be, but that's why we are here. I'll go back to the presentation and we shall continue from where we left off. In Kenya, the Micro and Small Enterprise Act, that's Chapter 55 of 2012, is the law that governs micro and small enterprises. They are regulated by the Micro and Small Enterprises Authority, and this is under the Ministry of Cooperatives and MSMEs. I know a lot of times you hear SME, but then there is an M before the SME, and that M represents micro enterprises. So micro enterprises, for those of us who clicked micro enterprises, myself being one, are those whose turnover does not exceed 500,000 shillings a year. It employs less than 10 people, and its registered capital does not exceed 5 million for service farms or farming, agriculture, or 10 million for the manufacturing sector. So I hope now we know what a micro enterprise is. Moving on, we're now moving to the S in the MSME. Small enterprises are those whose turnover does not exceed 5 million. It employs between 10 and 50 people, and its registered capital does not exceed 20 million for service farms or farming enterprises, and 50 million for the manufacturing sector. So that is a small enterprise. A medium enterprise, surprise, surprise, does not have a definition in the Micro and Small Enterprises Act because it only catered for the micro and the small enterprises. But a medium enterprise by the UN definition, which is supported by OECD and IMF, recognize that each country could identify a medium enterprise based on its own estimation on capital and turnover. However, it defines an ME or SME as an entity that employs 50 and 250 persons. So if we go back, small is 0 to 10. No, sorry, micro is 0 to 10. Small is 10 to 50, and ME or SME, as it's popularly known, is between 50 to 250. However, my search on the internet led me to see that in Kenya, the medium-sized enterprise is between 50 and 100 people. So maybe just to keep it simple, micro is under 10, small is under 50, and in Kenya, SME is under 100 employees. So what are the benefits of the SME space, and what have we seen here in Kenya to be the benefits of the SME space? Obviously, they are the largest business contributors to the economy, and this is up to 90%. They are sometimes small and nimble, and they are hubs of creativity and innovation. This leads to SDG 9 of the UN conventions, and that caters to industry, innovation, and infrastructure. As an aside, there are 17 sustainable development goals identified by the UN, in the year 2015. So SME supports SDG 9 and SDG 8. Moving on to the next point, they create employment for youth and professionals to deploy their skills. So for professionals, before they become business owners, before they become entrepreneurs and founders, start possibly at an SME. And that caters to decent work and economic growth, SDG number 8. Finally, but of course, this is not the final list of the benefits of SME, they drive economic growth. So in every country, and especially in Kenya, SMEs receive a lot of funding, that's foreign direct investment, from private equity or venture capitalist associations. So they are the ones that attract foreign capital into any country. And foreign capital could either be in management expertise or in kind or in cash. So SMEs actually build a country's capacity for foreign investment. But with all this, there are definitely challenges. And maybe these are some of the challenges we are facing as either micro, small, or medium enterprise owners. Limited access to formal finance. So it's always a long conversation with a bank manager or a financial institution. Also, competition from larger players, especially if you enter the manufacturing sector as a smaller player. The larger player may be dominant and could at times practice uncompetitive practices, which may make you run out of business. As well, another challenge is few resources and access to market opportunities. Obviously, when you come a little later into the game, the waters are a little infested by sharks, but that doesn't deter us. We swim anyway. And as well, SMEs face the challenge of structure. They're slow to input policies, procedures, and governance. And that is why we are here today. As a governance practitioner, one of my passions is to help SM and MEs to grow in the area of governance and to put in structures in place that will support their governance journeys. So I'd like us to do another poll, and Ayeko will help us to do this. I'd like us to get a sense of how many of us are participating in governance as regards boards. Do you have a board in your organization, or do you sit on a board? Let's get to see what kind of audience we have as regards governance and board memberships. This is fantastic. 71 ideally is maybe a B+ to an A. That a lot of us have boards in our organizations, or we are board directors. And it's a good thing that you're here, because this could elevate your governance to the next level. For us who said no, it's even better that you're here, because you could then embark on your board journey. And the organization I represent, Akira, is always ready to help. So back to our presentation. The board of directors. This is a group of individuals appointed by business owners, shareholders in this case of a company, who are entrusted with a mandate to guide, not to work, but to guide the company and sign off on the strategic direction of the company. So I use the term board of directors just because we may be talking largely about a company situation. However, we do have organizations such as pension schemes, they call them boards of trustees, NGOs as well as trusts, charitable trusts, they could have a board of trustees. For churches, they could have a board of elders. So it depends. A board is a board. And the point is that these individuals have been elected or nominated or appointed to guide the company or organization on its strategic direction. Other additional roles that this board does, it hires the CEO or the leader or the head of management and other key staff. As well, the board approves and signs off the financial statements. In companies listed at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, this is a very important role because these financial statements are then presented to the public, upon which they make investment decisions. For other entities, this board signs off on budgets and capital allocation to projects. Finally, the board ensures that the business succeeds, which is its primary role, while operating within the best interests of internal and external stakeholders. Now that we most likely would be companies within the audience, but these are duties that are transferable, the Companies Act 2015 does give general duties of directors. So if you're a director, this is a good time to check yourself if these are some of the duties you are carrying on at the board you sit. So there's the duty to act within the powers given to the mandate provided by the company. Where do you find this mandate? It's in the board charter, which is one of the governance document frameworks that I'll be discussing towards the end of the presentation. As well, another duty to act in good faith and promote the success of the business. As we said earlier, the main role of the board is to guide in the strategic direction. So as a board member, you are tasked to act in good faith and to make sure all your actions or all your guidance is toward the success of the business. A board member is to exercise independent judgment. This then demarcates the role as a guide and not an operator. Management or those employed by the company are to do the day-to-day operations. A board member is to guide on the strategic directions from which the day-to-day operations flow. As well, a board member has a duty to exercise reasonable care, skill, and diligence. They are appointed, or you are appointed, because you have a skill that the company could use. So that is your duty, to exercise reasonable care, skill, and diligence. A board member, and this is an important one, has a duty to avoid conflicts of interests and to act ethically. All your dealings should be above board, and you should recuse yourself. Recuse means step aside when a discussion which involves either your personal or financial interest is under discussion. And these are some of the things we, as company secretaries, give guidance to the chair of the board, so that if a discussion which touches on a member, and that is something that a member would self-declare, that member is excused from that discussion or the meeting altogether, so that a decision is made independent of that influence. And different industries provide for different levels of conflicts of interests. It is important to understand your business and the industry that it participates in. Those which are highly regulated have additional roles as regards conflicts of interest. As well, board members should not accept third-party benefits. This is possibly when a board member can influence a procurement decision, possibly to a company that they are associated with or own, and get benefits that would possibly tamper with their independent judgment. It is not wrong for a board member to support the business through a service or a product, but that needs to be ratified through the board, that there is no conflict apart from an arm's length business transaction, and then that transaction can proceed. It has to be above board. As well, board members have a duty to declare interests in proposed or existing transactions. Other board members would not know that you have an interest unless you declare it. So these are the basic duties of directors. I hope those of us who have boards or are sitting members act according to these duties. Moving on to SM and MEs, how do you chart your board journey? And this, for me, is possibly the crux of the discussion today. So you are a micro enterprise, possibly between 1 and 10 employees. In my opinion, at that stage of business, because it's still an early stage business, I would not recommend a board of directors, simply because it has a financial implication on the business, not only in paying the board members for their services, but also additional services such as a professional indemnity, directors and officers insurance cover, which would cost the business. So at this stage of business, you may be a self-employed professional or a business person. What I recommend would be a business coach or a business mentor. This is someone you respect in your industry or your field, who possibly has more business or experience than you, and where you can bounce off ideas from. You can capture that in a formal coaching or mentoring arrangement and organize regular catch-up meetings to bounce off those ideas or to get guidance on your next step. However, that should not mean you do not do any compliance measures, and that's why in the framework column, I have said that you should have appropriate tax registrations and licenses. So that's for a micro enterprise. For a small enterprise between 10 and 50 employees, as a business owner, the choice is yours. Obviously, being a champion of governance, I would say to consider a board, but again, it depends on your financial capability. You could get a small board, possibly of 3 or so members, 3 just because the odd number allows for easier voting, or you could have an advisory board. There are people, there are clients who tell me that I do not have a board, but I have an advisory board, which is great. An advisory board is possibly a collection of business mentors that you have or industry experts. You could call them into the same meeting, or you could meet them separately and bounce off your ideas or questions. You could consider a board if you are financially in a position to do so and be able to support your strategic direction with a board. In terms of compliance, again, tax registration, tax is almost a dirty word nowadays, just because of the different kind of tax regimes that we are being introduced to. You could look at registering yourself as an employer, because you do have 10 to 50 staff members, and as well, a HR manual for staff. Anything above 10 staff members requires a HR manual. But a HR manual should be the go-to thing, even if you are an employee component of 5, just to know what rights, duties, and obligations and contractual elements you should have within you and your staff. For a medium enterprise, this is the SME, between 50 to 100 or 50 and 250. For me, this is an absolute must. You must have a board. And this is a business owner or entrepreneur or founder-led organization. It is possibly mature. We do talk about the concept of startups. People recommend startups to be that 1st to 10-year mark of your business. However, the earlier you get on your governance journey, the better, because your direction will be very well founded by the advice and direction you receive from your board of directors. So in terms of frameworks, and we'll discuss this at the end, there would be a board charter, that's the board constitution, the annual work plan, training, evaluation of your board, and how do you engage your directors? You have an engagement letter and an induction program. So we've talked about what kind of board or governance support you need at whatever level. But how do you get there? How do you start? I recommend you do a SWOT analysis. That's a strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats chart. Once you do that, identify what your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats are. What are your threats and weaknesses? Your weaknesses are those things that are internal to you. Those could be solved by either building capacity in management or getting a capable, skilled professional as a staff member to take care of that weakness, because weaknesses are internal. Threats are external. For example, you have a competitive environment that you're trying to navigate as a small business. That is where you bring in external guidance, and that's where a board member would be appropriate. As well, opportunities being external advantages. What are the advantages you see within your business industry? That's another reason why you should have a board member to guide you. And these are the kind of board members I recommend. A CEO whisperer. A CEO whisperer is a respected yet knowledgeable person, possibly in years or in business, whom your CEO can bounce his ideas or her ideas off. So this is someone they respect, someone who has walked their journey and who they trust to guide them on the path. So it's important to have that, and possibly as a chairperson for the board. What does a CEO whisperer bring to the board? Wisdom. Secondly, an industry expert, especially when you are going into a technical industry or an industry that's highly competitive or dynamic, that it keeps changing in terms of possibly the product or the service. Get an industry expert who has deep understanding and who can make a good advocate for your business with regulators and competitors, and as well share knowledge with other board members. This is the person who in the board would tell the other board members, this is what I have seen in this industry. So what does your industry expert bring? They bring you credibility. When others see that you have this caliber of board member, they trust your business. Thirdly, a voice of the client. And the client could be both internal or external. So this could have either marketing or HR as their skill set, and they bring the voice of the end user, and it could also be staff to the board. So this is a person who would say, but what does a client want? But what do staff think about this? This is a person who makes you sensitive as a business to your internal and external stakeholders. Finally, the diplomat, also called a politician. This is the person who opens doors for you, very well networked, can get you somebody on phone who you need to speak to, can introduce you to suppliers, can introduce you to financiers. This is a person who will help propel your business forward in terms of business development. In terms of other markets, in US, boards are usually CEO driven. The CEO handpicks the board members and usually sometimes is the chair, but they've moved away from the CEO having the chair position. So in the US, the board is largely driven by appointment through the CEO. In Japan, what I found interesting was there must be a staff representative on the board. So that voice of the client, whether internal or external, is very important to Japan. In Germany, they respect small boards. So they try not to have a 10, 11 member board. They try and keep it very lean. But this is to provoke your thinking around how to create your board. And we'll be having questions and answers at the end. So I'll just move on to complete the presentation so that you can get to that part. Now you have a board in place. How do you derive accountability and value? Your board, first being a financial aspect of your business, needs to provide value. Any money that goes out of your business needs to come back in terms of an investment. So your board is also an investment for you. You need to have a high-performing board for the business to get the right direction and to move forward in the right way. How do you know your board is high-performing? It has to have outstanding partnership. How do you identify outstanding partnership? Healthy debate between management and between board members. There must be trust. The management must trust that the board is acting in its best interest as a team. The board must trust that the management is giving them the right information for them to give the right strategic direction. But for outstanding partnership, the entity that would show that this is working well is for the board. The board must show the management that we are here for the long term. Even through crisis, we are here. So that is how you know you have a high-performing board, that they stick with you through thick and thin. Transparency is another indicator of a high-performing board. Management needs to be transparent, needs to provide information and the right kind of information for the board to provide the right kind of strategic direction. And this is up to management to keep the board informed. If the board does not know, the board cannot lead. Teamwork and cohesion. Board members must take their role seriously. They must prepare, and I hope for board members on the call, they must prepare adequately. They must share their knowledge. You are on the board to share. So you must share knowledge and use your networks. Remember the politician or diplomat? You must use your networks because you're there for the success of the business. If you do not have time or you're sitting on too many boards, it would be right of you to consider stepping down from a board, or if you do not agree with the direction that the business is taking, instead of being a distractor to the business, it's right to opt out. In terms of strategic operation, a board should restrict itself to the strategic items of the business. They should avoid being drawn into operational matters. And how you do this is to ensure that the agenda and the board pack, that's the board papers that come to the board before board meetings, should contain matters that report on strategic initiatives. Yes, operational items will be discussed, but the board and through the chair should be able to conduct the meeting to derive what does this operational item being discussed mean to a strategic focus, and how can we guide management to deal with this operational issue, but not to dwell on it, because then it will lose its focus. So these are some of the indicators of a high-performing board. How do you evaluate that your board is high-performing? Using a governance consultant or through your company secretary with a governance consultant. During the board year, annually allow for a board evaluation using various matrices, and then you will then get to understand what's the health of my board. So that's how you derive accountability and value. We are coming to the end of the presentation. As we know, a board does not operate in isolation. It has a toolkit. And this is your ideal starter toolkit for your board. A corporate governance policy is where it all begins. This is the why we have a board. This is where we want our board to serve. This is how we want our board to serve. Following that is a board charter. And for those who have committees, committee charters. This is where the board and the committee members derive their mandates. As well, attached to the board charter is a code of ethics and conduct for board members so that they know where the line lies. Thereafter, a board directory with directors' engagement letters. You just don't appoint a board member without a letter. It's an engagement and a contractual one at that. It could even have a term limit for the board members to sit. And of course, personal information or personal documentation for the boards, including a CV or the identification documents, are needed so that you can build a director's register. Thereafter, once they've signed the engagement letter, have an induction plan on how you shall introduce them to the business and induct them on their roles, and then you onboard the board director. Once on board, and we talked about this earlier, anytime there is an instance of conflict, the board member should report, this is my conflict, and the company secretary should register and record the conflict in a conflict of interest register. As well, there should be a register of shareholders and beneficial owners, because shareholders and beneficial owners are likely the appointers of the board members. As well, company secretary's details should be there. And if you have either an in-sourced or outsourced company secretary, you should have their details and their practicing documents. For the board to operate well, It should have an annual work plan of activities, scheduling the meetings, which are usually quarterly, and as well a training calendar. You derive a training calendar from the training needs that your board requires. As well, the strategic plan. In the beginning, management would propose, this is what we feel the targets should be. This is the strategic direction we believe the business needs to go. And the board's work is to comment, to modify the strategic plan, and to sign off. So the board of directors owns the strategic plan. The management owns the execution of the objectives of the strategic plan. Finally, it's good to have a company manual. Obviously, with the different stages of business, you could have a business with several departments. The board actually has ultimate responsibility of how the company runs, not operationally, but strategically. To support that, they would need to know this is how each department operates. These are the policies and procedures of all departments, including the HR manual. And then they would sign off, and from that, align with the strategic direction. That brings us to the end of my presentation. So I'll turn over to Richard, and we shall have a question and answer session.
Wow, such an insightful presentation. I think we've busted the myth. We have to rubber stamp it and say busted. Thank you so much, Patricia. We are now very aware about how important governance is important for any sort of business, and it's not a must for it to be for large corporations. We have seen how it can work for SMEs, micro SMEs, and any small, medium enterprises that you have. So I think we have the chat box flowing with several questions, which we will take. We have a question from Kane Njoroge. Can you discuss any potential risk or challenges that SMEs may face during governance transition process?
Yes, so one of the risks SMEs may make or take is once you're decided that this is the way I want to go, I want to set up a board, choosing your board members, and we've talked about them, the CEO whisperer, the diplomat, the client care, and the industry expert. Choosing the wrong members to join your board can actually distract your business. You may want to choose somebody and find out they actually have an interest in your business or its activities, and they are there for the wrong reason. So that's one of the risks. In addition, some entrepreneurs form boards but do not have a financial plan for the board. A lot of people ask me, I want to set up a board, but can they come for free? As we know, anything you get cheap, you get what you paid for. Why we require people to have board engagement letters, which also indicates what compensation you give them, is so that you can demand value. And that's why you can hold them accountable. I have signed you up. There's a payment. There's a requirement to attend meetings. And if I don't receive value, you are no longer fit to sit on my board. That's another risk. Having a board that comes for free. Of course, in the beginning, you may want to negotiate a lower sitting allowance rate, which is great. If you do negotiate, that is better for you. But having someone come on for free, that would be a risk to you because they may not dedicate the time that is needed for your business. Having no governance at all is a risk. Governance directs how businesses make decisions. And it's not just a board, but under the board and under the board charter then falls a limits of authority. How do we sign off financial statements? How do we sign off checks in the bank? It actually details almost all the processes in a business, and that a board should demand to see what are the limits of authority in this business. What is the limit of authority for the CEO? That is why some boards have human resource committees or governance nominations and remuneration committees. They also steer the conversation around how staff are dealt with, how executives are compensated. So governance, not having a governance framework is a risk. Choosing the wrong board members is a risk. Having a board working for you for free is also a risk.
Wow, thank you. Joroge, I hope you've been answered with the questions. When it comes, we have another question from Claire, who's asking, how can SMEs measure the impact of their strategic governance initiatives, their overall business performance?
Yeah, that's a good direction. So that's a good question. Thank you. So one of the things I had mentioned earlier, you should have a high-performing board. The easiest way to measure whether they are adding value is through a board evaluation, which you do annually. Just the same way employees go through performance reviews, it's the same methodology. You agree on how or what matrices to use at the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, board members evaluate, and this could be through questionnaires or could be through a qualitative interview process with a governance consultant. The governance consultant prepares a report based on the outcome of questionnaires or the qualitative interviewing and presents that this is how your board is doing. That's how you evaluate and derive value. But in addition to that, what the other perspectives I shared, is there a partnership between the board and the business? Is the board working for the benefit of the business, or do you have board members who are there just to get compensated or to have deals with the business? Is the management being transparent to the board for the board to be able to make its decisions or at least give guidance? Is the board focused on strategic operations, or are your board members always in the office trying to fix the finance system or sign off an ERP or find out how the HR manager hires and fires people? They should limit themselves to the strategic direction of the business. And how is the board working together? So those performance indicators could then be evaluated during the board evaluation carried out by a governance consultant.
Wow. So I thank you so much for that answer. You echoed what I was actually taking home here, that your board has to work for you as a business. So thank you so much for that. We have a last question from Ruth Chiario. Can you offer some guidance on how SMEs can sustain continuous and improve their governance practices over long term?
So at the beginning is to decide as an S, an M, or an ME, meaning micro enterprise, or a small enterprise, or an ME, a small and medium enterprise business. So a micro enterprise, all you need is a business coach. So for the long term, how are you and your business coach or advisor getting along? Have you signed an agreement on how you'll be meeting? Is your coach always prompting you to do better, telling you, this is an assignment I want you to do as regards your entrepreneurship journey. Let's meet next week and see how you're doing. So that's for a micro enterprise. For a small enterprise, it's up to you whether you are financially sound to have a board at that point. Else, you can have an advisory board. These are informal members. They do not meet regularly, but you can meet them every so often. It is good to give them something in form of gratitude in terms of payment, something for just their time. It's good to honor people's time. But should you decide to go to a board direction, yes, you get a lean board, and then you build your governance framework from there, from a corporate governance policy to a board charter, to then engaging the board members, to a code of ethics, to a training plan for the board. Thereafter, getting your manuals in place, and then signing off the strategic direction. So that's the path. First, you choose what kind of framework is good for you. You come up with a policy, and then you come up with a toolkit, which I mentioned. And luckily, we shall share the slides so that then you can follow your journey, whether you're a micro, whether you're a small enterprise. But for me, an SME being a mid-enterprise, 50 to 250 employees, it is imperative that you consider having a board in place. And it does not have to be large, but that's the first step for your corporate governance journey.
Thank you for answering that and telling us how it's important to have such steps when it comes to your board. I think one more last question, and it's a very intriguing one by Monte, who's asking, I would love to learn more about the criteria to pick a CEO, whisperer, an industry expert, diplomat, and the voice of the client.
Yeah. So Monte, your network is your net worth. To be very candid, it's really who you know. But also, who can you approach, who you will provide them such a great value proposition to sit on your board. Career directors or those who are in the market, we know them. There's several people who we see, almost rotated in boards, and that usually happens at the listed entities. But your network is your net worth. A CEO whisperer is that person you look at and say, if you're the CEO, this is the person I esteem in terms of ethics. I feel they're wise. If they tell me that I am wrong, I will listen because I know they have my best intentions. CEO whisperer is wisdom. Whose wisdom do you respect? So think through your network. Is it someone who's gone ahead of you in business? Is it a former colleague? Is it someone you admire? And if it's someone you admire who you do not have a connection with, it's only a few degrees of separation now. Reach out to them, tell them this is my entity. I'd love you to sit on my board. I'd love you to chair my board because CEO whisperers are usually the chairs, and offer them a value proposition in terms of this is where I want my business to go. Come along for the journey. For an industry expert, it's easier because if you're in that industry, who do you see either as a professional or someone who may have retired from that industry, who you admire and you feel that they have so much to teach you as a business owner. So for example, if you're in the tech industry, you could think about your tech industry compatriots and look at one of either the CTOs or the CIOs, that's a chief information or chief technology officer, and say, hey, I'm in tech. That person is leading a division or operations in tech. They could be a good industry expert for my tech company. So you choose someone who you know has the professional capability, and as well, they are well networked, possibly with regulators, especially if you're in the regulated industry, because you want someone who can stand as a credibility tool for you. Because people look at your board and they go like, oh, if so-and-so is sitting on that board, then this company must have something to offer me. That's for the industry expert. For the diplomat and politician, this is someone who you know is very well networked. You might not know them personally, but again, approach them. It's just a few degrees of separation. If you don't know them, someone in your network does. Write them a proposal. I'd love you to sit on my board. This is the kind of direction I'm thinking about. You be candid about what you're offering them in terms of board remuneration, but make it more appealing as regards to what your vision for your company is. A lot of people want to serve, but they want to serve someone who's serious about where they're going. For the sensitivity or client care director, this one, I think for me is the easiest, because then you just look for a marketing or a HR professional, because these people are attuned to the market, the external client, or internal in terms of staff. It could be a HR director or manager in a corporation you admire, who you may know, or it could be a marketer who you know has pushed a similar kind of product or service, who you'd like them to be the voice of the customer for your business. So that's how you look for these people. Your network is your net worth. And if they're not in your network, surely 6 degrees of separation will get you there. But offer them a compelling reason to join your board.
Thank you. Monte, you see that maybe even the person who you want to be your board director can be in these 50 people who have joined here right now. So just network with them, find out what kind of person can fit that criteria you're looking for. So we want to thank you so much, Patricia. We've come to the end and we really appreciate. Could you allow us to share this presentation?
Yes, I am happy to share the presentation. I'm happy to share my contacts. Akira is in the space of advisory, board compliance, and as well company secretarial services, which are outsourced. I look forward to hearing from you should you need my services or Akira services. Thank you very much, Richard.
I'll go into closing, telling you more about Springboard. Springboard is a microfinance company that has transformed life by offering financial services to individuals and businesses for the past decade. We've been in existence for 10 years and more. So if you need money, we are here to serve your needs. You can find us at a town near you. Reach out to us or through your preferred social media platforms. And thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've served you with a very hot lunch this chilly weather afternoon. And we hope to see you next month on the last Friday. Thank you so much. Goodbye.